Hey guys, recently I've had a few requests to do a crash course on AJAX. AJAX is an extremely important technology in web development, so I thought it would be a good idea. So we're going to talk about what AJAX is, what it's used for. We're going to go through some slides, look at how it works, and then we're going to jump into some code, and we're going to experiment a little bit with AJAX and the XHR object. Alright, so before we get started, I just want to quickly mention some of my social media links for anybody that wants to follow me and stay up to date with videos and projects, Udemy courses, and so on. I also just created a Discord chat server that's open to the public. It's a place where anyone can go and get help with programming and web development, share ideas, and so on. I pop in daily and chat for a little bit as well. Alright, so what is AJAX? It's an acronym for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. It's not a language, it's not a framework or a library, it's simply a set of web technologies to send and receive data from a client to a server asynchronously. So it's all done behind the scenes without having to explicitly reload the web page. Now, one thing that's kind of ironic is even though XML is included in the acronym, XML is very rarely used in AJAX anymore. JSON has pretty much taken its place. That's JavaScript object notation. And it's just easier, it's faster, and it's much more popular. So most of the APIs, if you're working with external APIs, you're probably going to be working with JSON and not XML. Or maybe both. Sometimes these external APIs will return both if needed. Alright, and AJAX can also just work with plain text. So let's take a look at a quick diagram to kind of explain how AJAX works. So this is the client or the browser, and then this is the server. This could be your local server, or it could be some kind of web API, some kind of external API. Alright, now usually when we work with a server, when we make a request to a server from a client, we type in a link or we click a link, we type in a URL or we click a link, and it makes a common request to the server, and then the server sends a common response back, which includes the headers, the web page, pretty much just everything. We request everything and we get everything. Well, with AJAX, what it allows us to do is it allows us to make requests asynchronously in the background without having to reload or refresh the entire web page. Alright, so if we wanted to just update one little section of text, we can do that with AJAX, and it's a hell of a lot faster than having to reload the entire page. Okay, and it makes things much more interactive. Now, the way that this works is by making some kind of AJAX call, and this can be done with plain JavaScript or it can be done with some kind of library. Okay, it can be done with jQuery or an HTTP library like Axios. There's a lot of different ways to do it. We're going to basically focus on plain JavaScript. All right, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, the server is going to return data, usually in JSON format. It could be in XML. It could be plain text. And this request is done by using the XML HTTP request object. Okay, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. But we'll make our request. It'll do whatever it needs to on the server. It may update a database. You may have it so that when you type something into a form and then you click outside of the form, that'll actually make a request and update the database. Or you may just be fetching some data, you'll get it back, and you'll do what you want with it. You can put it in your web page or whatever it is that you want to do. There's just so many different things that you can do with AJAX. All right, now, like I said, this happens through something called the XML HTTP request object, also called the XHR object. And this is actually an API in the form of an object. Okay, and what that means, what I mean by an object is it has properties and methods attached to it. And this is actually provided by the browser's JavaScript environment. So all modern browsers have this API. Its methods transfer data between client and server or browser and server, and it also can be used with other protocols other than HTTP, although HTTP is usually what it's used with. Alright, it can also work with data other than XML. Obviously, like I said, AJAX is these days more commonly used with JSON. Alright, it can also use plain text. So we're going to be examining this object, and we're going to look at some of its properties and methods and look at how it works a little bit. Alright, so there's a bunch of different ways to make AJAX calls. Now, just like with everything, there's libraries to make things easier as far as the amount of code that you need to write, the handlers, and things like that. Now, libraries can be great, but you should know how to make an actual request using plain old JavaScript, using the XHR object, before jumping into these libraries. So that's what we're going to focus on in this series, or not in this series, but in this video, in this crash course. And then towards the end, if we have time, we'll jump in and we'll look at some of these libraries. All right, so jQuery is, you guys know what jQuery is. It's a DOM manipulation library. It's huge. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. I would not suggest using jQuery just for AJAX calls. It's way too much overkill for that. If you are using it anyways in your application or your website, then fine, but I wouldn't suggest using it just for AJAX calls. Okay, a library like Axios or SuperAgent, these are really nice slim libraries for making HTTP requests, and you can make updates and deletes and all kinds of things. So these are really nice libraries to work with. The Fetch API is actually part of the browser. It's pretty new. I know it's fully implemented in Firefox and Chrome. I'm not too sure about the others. So if someone wants to clarify, the compatibility with Edge and Safari and these other browsers, I'm not really sure. I have used it and I do like it. I'm just not sure as far as the compatibility goes. Although I know there are polyfills for it and stuff like that. Prototype is another library I haven't used, so I can't say too much about. And then, of course, we have Node.js, Node HTTP, but you need to install Node and get into that, and that's just not part of this course here. All right, so what we're going to do now is jump in. We're going to I'm going to show you how to set up an AJAX request. We're going to really look at the XHR object, look at some of its methods and properties, and I want you to just kind of wrap your head around how AJAX actually works. And then if we have time, we're going to look into using some of the libraries as well. All right, so let's get started. Alright guys, so we're going to get started. Now, as far as your environment, you do need to have some kind of server to work with AJAX. You don't want to be just opening your HTML file from Windows or from your file system. Now, you have a lot of different options. What we're going to be doing is using xampp, which is gives us an Apache server, it gives us PHP and MySQL on our local machine. And if you want to install this, you can go to apachefriends.org and you can install it. If you watch the second video of my PHP front to back series, it shows you how to install it. Now, the reason I'm using this is because we are going to deal a little bit with PHP towards the end. For those videos, you will need PHP, and xampp gives you that. For the first few videos, just looking at making requests to an external API and to a plain text file and a JSON file, you don't actually need PHP installed, and you could use any server. You could just use your, if you're using VS Code, you could use Live Server or something like that. But we're just going to use xampp, so I'm going to go to my C drive and then xampp and then htdocs. This is the server folder, and I'm just going to create a folder here called AJAX crash. And we're going to be creating a bunch of different files in here. What I'm going to do is open this folder up in VS Code. So htdocs AJAX crash. All right, and we're going to create a new file here called ajax1.html. We're going to have about 8 different files because we're going to go through, loading a plain text file, loading JSON, loading an external data, loading from a PHP file, and then we're going to look at some of the different libraries as well. So hopefully this crash course will be about an hour or so. I want to keep it around there. All right, now what we're going to do is just set up a basic HTML document. Now I'm using VS Code, which has Emmet, so I can just do an exclamation and tab, and it'll give me this basic HTML layout. And I'm just going to enable word wrap here so you guys can see everything. All right, and then what I'll do is just, let's change the title. We'll say AJAX1, and I just want to give a little description for each file. We're going to let's just say, we'll say text file, because we're just going to fetch a text file asynchronously. So we'll save this, and then I should be able to go to my local host /AJAX crash ajax1.html. Alright, and you'll see it's going to load that HTML file. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a button to click, and then we're going to create a function that's going to make our AJAX call. So let's go ahead and let's create a button. I'm going to give this an ID of, let's say, button. Whoops. So an ID of button, and then let's go in here and we'll say get. We'll just say get text file. Alright, and then what we'll do, actually we'll just leave that. That's all we'll do for now. So we'll save it, and we should see a button that says get text file. So let's go ahead and create some script tags right above the ending body tag. So we'll say script, put those tags in there, and we want to create an event listener. Alright, because we want to catch the click of this button. So what we'll do is we'll say document dot get element by ID. Okay, we gave it an ID of button. And you're going to learn, if you're new to JavaScript, you'll learn quite a bit about DOM manipulation and things like that as well. So get element by ID button, and then we just want to add an event listener. So we're going to say dot add event listener. We want to listen for a click on this button, and once we click, we want to run a function called load text. Okay, so now we're going to create that load text function. And this isn't going to be like a clean cut application type course. We're just messing with the code so that we can see what's going on. I'm not trying to create anything pretty or anything like that. Okay, just to let you guys know. So let's just do a console.log here, and we'll just say button clicked, just so we know that it's actually hooked up. So we'll go ahead and click F12 to open up our dev tools. Make sure you're on the console, and you reload, and we click, and we get button clicked. Alright, so now let's set up to make an AJAX request. So what I'm going to do is create another file, and I'm going to call it sample.txt. Okay, so just a simple txt file. And we're going to put some text in here. I have Emmet, so I'm going to say lorem50 tab, and that'll just give us 50 words of sample text. And I'm going to go ahead and save that and close it. Alright, so we have this sample text file. So let's get rid of this console log. And the first thing we want to do here is we want to create the XHR object. Alright, and this file is going to be heavily commented because I want you guys to know what's going on. The rest of the files, not so much, just this one, just to kind of explain everything. So to create this object, we need to create a variable, and you'll see this sometimes called request or even HTTP request, XML request. I like to call it XHR, just to keep it short. But we're going to set it to new XML HTTP request. Okay, just like that. And that's actually going to be a function, so it's going to have parentheses on the end. Okay, next thing we want to do is decide we need a function to make the request, the type of request, and what file or URL we're making it to. So we're going to use the open function. So let's say open, and this takes in 3 parameters. One is going to be the type, one is going to be either the URL or the file name, and then one is going to be if it's asynchronous or not, so true or false. So we'll take that XHR. Alright, and actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's just console.log the XHR. Alright, just so you can see that this is actually an object with a bunch of properties and methods. So if I click the button, you'll see XML HTTP request, and it has all this stuff associated with it. So it has an onload function, which we're going to be dealing with. It has a ready state with different values. It has a status, so HTTP status 200 is normal. 404 means it's not found. So it has all these properties and methods assigned to it. All right, what we want to do here is we want to call open. Okay, which actually it's not going to show right here, but it has a function called open. So we're going to say xhr.open, and then like I said, it takes in these three parameters. First one is going to be the type of request, which is going to be get. Then it's going to take the URL or the file name. In our case, it's just going to be sample.txt. And then it's going to be a true or false if it's going to be asynchronous or not. So we're going to say true. This is going to be asynchronous. All right. Now, there's two functions that we could use here. One is onload. One is onreadystatechange. Onreadystatechange is the older way of doing things, and I'll kind of explain that in a little bit. But first, we're going to use onload. All right, and that's what we're going to use throughout the series. I keep saying series, throughout the course. So let's say onload, xhr onload, and we're going to say equal function. All right, and then in here, what we want to do is we want to check for the status of the response. So we're going to say if. Now we can say xhr.status, but since we're in this function, we can actually just use the this keyword. So we can say if this status is equal to 200. Okay, now 200 is basically means okay. When you make a request to a server, 200 is okay. And I'm just going to paste in some comments down here. So 200 is okay. 403 is forbidden. 404 is not found. Why does this keep opening? I don't want that open. All right, so we want to check to make sure it's okay before we do anything else. All right, now what I'm going to do is just do a console.log, and we should be able to get our response from this file by saying this.response text. Okay, just like that. So what we'll do is if we go ahead and we reload this and we click get text file, we're not going to see anything yet because there's one last function we need to call, and that's send. So we're going to go right below the onload, still within the load text function, and we're going to say xhr.send. Okay, and I'll just put a comment here. Sends request. All right, so let's go ahead and save, and then we'll reload and click get text file, and you'll see that it gives us a response. Now we're logging the response, but even if we didn't do that, so if I comment that out, you'll see it's not going to log anything. But with the Chrome tools, if we go to network and we reload, and you'll see there's nothing down here. If I click the button, all of a sudden you'll see this sample text. You'll see it has a status of 200. It has a type of XHR. And if we click on it, you'll see all the headers. I just want to make this a little bigger. So the headers with the request type, which was a get, we have a 200 response. It gives us all the content type, which is text plain, gives us the date, all that stuff, and then it gives us the response, which is the content of that file. All right. So we're getting that data. Even if we're not doing anything with it from within onload, we're still getting it in the browser. All right, so what I want to do now is show you the old way of doing things, which was using onreadystatechange instead of onload. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just for now comment this out, and then we're going to say xhr dot onreadystatechange equals function. All right, and then when we do this, we do need to check for the status, but we also need to check for something called the ready state. All right, now I'm going to paste in something else in down here, and this is just the different states that the request goes to. So 0 is going to be request not initialized, 1 is server connection established, 2 is request received, 3 is processing request, and 4 is request is finished and response is ready. So when we use onreadystatechange, we actually have to make sure that we're at number 4 here. Okay, so in here we need to do if this dot ready state, which is a property of XHR, and we want to make sure that that's equal to 4. All right, and then we want to make sure that the status is equal to 200. Okay, and then we can do what we want. We can console.log Same thing, we can console log this dot response text. Alright, so now if we go ahead and save this and go and reload and click, you'll see it does the same thing that it did with onload. Alright, now the difference with onload is this is not going to run unless ready state is ready, unless it's at 4. So what I want to do is go to some different points and show you what the ready state actually equals. So we'll go right under where we did the open, and we're going to console.log. Let's see, so we'll say ready state, and let's say xhr.readystate. Okay, remember it's a property of xhr. So if we go ahead and save that and we go ahead and click the button, you know what, let me get rid of the console log of the text just to clear that up. Alright, so let's click it and we get ready state 1. So at this point of the whole thing, we're at 1, which is server connection established. Now let's go down to onreadystatechange, and let's go before this check. Okay, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to log the ready state before the check. So if we go ahead, and now you'll see it goes through 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's actually going through all of those until we check 4, and then we want to do what we need to. But with onload, it's not going to go through all of these checks. So if I go ahead and I comment this out, and we go and uncomment this, and we go and we check our ready state and save and click the button, you'll see we get 1 right here, and then here it's already at 4. Okay, so onload is not going to run unless it's ready. That's the biggest difference between these two. Alright, hopefully that makes sense. Now it's perfectly fine for you to use onReadyStateChange instead of onload. Just know that you have to check for the ready state here as well. Alright, and then we also have a method on XHR called onProgress. Alright, so we'll say optional, and let's say this is usually used for like loading or loaders. You know, when you click something or you go to a page and you see the little round loading thing, the little GIF image, that's usually signifying that you're waiting for something. So if you want to do something like that, you can use onProgress. So xhr.onProgress equals function, and let's go ahead and log the ready state here. Okay, so we'll click that, and you'll see that that's actually on 3. Okay, onProgress is on 3, which is what? Processing request. Okay, so if it hangs or something, or if it's waiting in that progress state, you're going to see your little loader there if that's how you set it up. Alright, and this is completely optional. I'm just trying to show you guys the different properties and methods attached to this XHR object. Now, one more thing that you should do if you're going to use onload is you should also use onError. In case something goes wrong, you want to have that handler. So what we'll do is go right under it and say xhr.onError, and just set that equal to function. And then, you can handle it how you want. I'm just going to do console log, and we'll just say request error. Alright, now you're not going to need all of this stuff. Like I said, I'm just going through. You're not going to need both onReadyStateChange and onload. You're not going to need onProgress unless you want some kind of loader. Alright, so it's not as hard as it looks right here. And you're going to see that in the other files that we create. Alright, now you can do whatever you want with the return data. In this case, we were just console logging it, but if we want to put it into the actual web page, what we could do is, let's just put in a couple line breaks, and we'll create a div with the ID of text. And then what we'll do is go right here, and we'll say document dot get element by ID, text, and we'll say dot inner HTML equals this dot response text. Okay, so if we go and we reload and click that, brings the text right in. Okay, and it does it all asynchronously. There was no reloading of the page or anything like that. It's all behind the scenes. Okay, and this is a very, very simple example of what AJAX can do. Obviously, you can do a lot more. This is just to give you an example. Now, you can test for other statuses as well. So right now, we're just testing for 200, which means everything's okay. But we could also do like else if, and let's say else if this dot status equals 404, which is a not found. Then we could actually we don't have to console log. We'll just put it here in the text. Okay, so we'll say document dot get element by ID inner HTML equals, and we'll say not found. All right. And now if I go and I change this to sample2.txt, which we know there isn't a file called that, but if I save and we go and we click, we're going to get not found. It's also going to tell us down here. All right, but just in case you want to handle that somehow, like putting it in the actual page, you can do that as well. Okay. And there's a lot of different HTTP statuses if you want to go ahead and do a search. The Mozilla website is really good for stuff like that. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this file. So that's basically just kind of explaining everything. Now we're just going to jump in and we're going to make this a little more simple and, you know, leave out these comments and these explanations and stuff like that. So let's create a new file. Let's see, so we'll create a new file called ajax2.html. Alright, and let's put in some basic HTML tags, and we'll say AJAX2. So this one we're going to be fetching JSON, or yeah, let's say local JSON. And what I'm going to do is create two files here. One is going to be user.json, and then one is going to be users.json. Okay, so for user.json, I'm just going to paste this in. So very simple. We just have an object here with an ID, a name, and an email. We'll save that. Let's go to users, and we're just going to paste in a JSON array of users with an ID, name, and email. And you may recognize these names here if you're cool. All right, so let's save those, close them up, and that's the data that we want to fetch. So let's go to ajax2.html. And then what I'll do is in the actual HTML in the body, let's create a button with the ID of button1, and we'll say get user, and then we'll have another button. We'll call this button2, and we'll say get users. All right, and then we just want let's see, what do I want to do? Let's just put in a couple line breaks, and then we'll have a div with the ID of user. Nothing in it, just the div. And actually, let's put an H1 above it. Oh. Oh, Emmett is really kind of acting up lately. So we'll say user, and then right below that we'll say users and change that to users. So that's our HTML. Now let's put in our script tags. Okay, and we want to document dot get element by ID. We want button1, and we want an event listener. So add event listener. We want to listen for a click, and we want to call a function called load user. All right, let me turn on word wrap. Can make this smaller too. So now we're going to go and create that function, load user. All right, and we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did in the other file. We're going to create a variable xhr. We're going to set it to new, XML HTTP request. All right, and then we want to call xhr.open. We're going to make a GET request, and then the URL or the file name, in this case it's going to be user.json, and then true for async. All right, then what we want to do is use our onload, so xhr.onload, set that to function. Okay, we want to check to make sure everything's okay with the status, so if, we want to do an if. So if this dot status is equal to 200, then for now we'll just console.log this dot response text. All right, and then of course we need our send. So down here we need to say xhr.send. Now you should put in your on error here as well, but I'm just going to leave it out. So let's save that. Let's go over here and reload. Let's say get user, and there we go. So it's getting the user from user.json. Now you may think if we go ahead and we put this in a variable like user, and then we say console.log, and we say user.name, okay, because you can see it clearly has a name value. Just make this smaller. So if I save that, we reload, and we click that, you'll see we get undefined. Okay, the reason for that is because we actually have to wrap this in a function called json.parse if we want to be able to access the values that way. So if we reload, click it, now we get Rick. Okay, so now we can get user.email or user.id and so on. So let's take this user and let's output it into this div right here. So we'll get rid of the console log, and we'll create a variable called output, and we're going to set that, we're just going to initialize it with an empty value here, and then we're going to just append onto it. So we're going to say output, and then we can append with plus equals. Okay, so we're going to say plus equals, let's put a UL, and then if we want to go on to another line, we have to put a plus. Now, if this were a production project, I would be using ES6 template strings or template literals, where we can use backticks and we don't have to concatenate like this. But I want you guys just to have this in, you know, pure ES5 JavaScript. I know it's a little more difficult, but you should know how to do it anyways. All right, so let's go ahead and continue this here. So next line will be the li. We'll have an li, so let's go li like that, and then we want to concatenate in here. Well, we'll say id, and then we'll concatenate in like this, so user.id, and then let's just copy that, paste in two more, so that'll be id, this will be the name, this will be the email. Alright, and then finally we'll just have an ending UL, and we can end this with a semicolon. So that's basically our HTML string, or our output string. And then what we can do is we can say document.getElementID. We want to grab the element with the ID of user. So user.innerHTML equals output. So let's go ahead and save it. Let's go up here and reload, click get user, and there he is. There's Rick. So what we've done is we've fetched data from the JSON file behind the scenes asynchronously, and we've built a template string or an output string, and we've output it into the browser. And this was all done asynchronously without having to reload the page or anything like that. All right. So if we wanted to get users, which is an array, that's going to be pretty similar. Let's do that with this button 2. So what I'll do is add another event listener with button 2, and we're going to call a function called load users. All right, and then what I'll do is copy the entire load user function, paste that down here, change that to load users. This time we want to get users.json, and let's see, we're going to go down here. Now, since we're getting an array, we need to do this a little differently. We need to actually do a loop so that we can loop through and then append the output, append the UL to each user. So we're going to wrap this in a for loop. We're going to say for. I'm actually going to use a for in loop, so we'll say var I in users, which should be this. Okay, that should be users. And let's see, we're just going to wrap. Let's see, we want this to end right here. Oh. Okay, so you don't want to have this document get element by ID. You don't want that in the loop. All we want to do is just add in the output in the loop. All right, and then we're going to output this to users. So let's put an S right there and save. And then we can still get the single user if we click get users. Now the reason we're getting undefined for these is because since we did a loop here, we can't access it with just user.id. We need to say users and then the current iteration. So we need to put an I, brackets and an I, like that. Okay, and then we'll save. Let's try it again, get users, and there we go. So now we're getting them all. All right, so that's how we can fetch some local JSON with AJAX. All right, now what I want to do is I want to show you how we can work with an external API. So we're going to use the GitHub API, which is extremely public, extremely easy to use. We don't need any authentication or anything unless we're making a ton of requests. So let's create a new file called ajax3.html. And let's go ahead and put some structure in here. We'll say ajax3, and we'll say external API. So in the body, all I want to put here is a button. We'll give it an ID of users. I'm sorry, an ID of button. And let's say load GitHub users. Okay, we'll put a couple line breaks. Oops. And we'll put an H1. We'll say GitHub users. And then we'll just put a div with the ID of users. Whoop. All right. Now for the GitHub API, all we have to do is visit an URL, which is https://api.github.com/users, and it'll give us a list of the first 100 users. You could add parameters to filter this and stuff, but we're not going to get into that. I just want to show you how to actually make the request. So that's the URL we're going to make the request to, instead of just a local file like we've been doing. All right, and like I said, some servers are different. Some APIs you need authentication. They need cores enabled, which has to do with cross domains and using your client on a different domain than the server, and it can get really complicated. But what we're going to do is go down here and put in our scripts. And let's put a document.getElementById button. And we want to add an event listener for a click. And we want to call load users. All right, so let's go ahead and actually put a comment here. We'll say load GitHub users and function load users. And what we want to do is grab our XHR object. That. And we're going to call xhr.open. This is going to be get. Now for the second parameter, it's going to be this URL. So the GitHub API /users, and then just add true here. All right, then we'll do our onload. Okay, so in here, let's go ahead and check for status. If this dot status is equal to 200, then we want to create a variable called users, set it to json.parse, and this dot response text. Okay, so that should give us the, actually let's just console log the output here, users. All right, we need to do our send, so let's make sure we go down here and say xhr.send and save, and then let's go to ajax3.html, click load GitHub users, and there we go, there's all of our users. So I want to output these into the browser. So what we'll do is kind of the same thing we've been doing. Let's create a variable called output and set it to nothing, and then we're going to loop through. So we're going to do for var users, or I'm sorry, for var I in users, and we'll say output plus equals, and let's just append a bunch of stuff here. So we're going to put in a div with the class of user. All right, and then let's see, we're going to put an image, because if we look at what we can get here, we can get an avatar URL, which is the actual image of the GitHub user. So in the source attribute here, we're going to concatenate, so single quotes and then plus sign, and we'll say users I dot avatar underscore URL. All right, and I'm just going to give that a width of 70 and a height of 70. All right, so that'll give us the image. Let's concatenate the next line. So we'll put a UL here. And then we'll do an LI. And then inside the LI, we're going to put the login. You see we have access to all this data. We just want the, actually let's do the ID and the login. Okay, that's really all I'm going to use here. So ID, we'll have to concatenate users I dot login, I'm sorry, dot ID. Okay, and we're going to copy that. This one will be the login. And then we'll have the closing UL. And then we'll have the closing div. All right, and that should be our output string. So now we want to go under the loop and just do document.getElementById. We want the user's ID, and we want to say .inner HTML equals output. So let's save. Let's go back and reload. And there we go. So now we're fetching all those users, putting them into the HTML. Now I'm just going to add a very, very simple styling up here. So in the head, let's put in some style tags. And I'm going to take the class of user, and let's say display flex, which will just align them horizontally, and we'll give them a background of light gray. And let's do a padding of 10 pixels, and let's do a margin bottom of 10 pixels. All right, and then for the UL, so I'll just say user UL. I just want to take away the bullets, so we'll say list type none. All right, so let's reload, click it again, and now it'll look like that. So a little nicer. And that's how we can use AJAX to fetch data from an external API asynchronously behind the scenes and input it into our web page. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work a little bit with PHP. So what I'm going to do is create a new file here called process.php. Alright, now if you're not using XAMPP or some kind of server that has PHP installed, this will not work. So make sure that you're using either XAMPP or WAMP, or you're on an actual Apache server, maybe on an Ubuntu machine or something like that. Alright, so for now, what I'm going to do is just put in a PHP tag, and I'm just going to echo out a string that says processing. Okay, we'll save that. And then we're going to create a new AJAX file, so we'll say ajax4.html. And close that up. Now, a lot of you probably know how to submit a form to a PHP file. Okay, so you can make a GET request with a form or a POST request. So I'm going to show you how to do that first, and then how to submit a GET request form and POST request through AJAX. Alright, so let's go ahead and put some markup in here. And this is going to be AJAX4, and we'll just say AJAX and PHP forms. I don't know. Alright, and then let's see, in the body. Actually, before we do the forms, let's just put a button in just to show you we can fetch data from PHP. So we'll say button, let's give it an ID of button, and we'll say get name. Alright, and then we'll put in our script tags. And then let's do a event listener. So document.getElement get element by ID, button, add event listener. We want to click. And what we'll do is we'll call a function called getName. Okay, let me just turn on word wrap. I don't know why word wrap doesn't just stay on. So let's create a function called getName. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set up our XHR object. Okay, we're going to say xhr.open. This is going to be a GET request to our PHP file, which is process.php. And we'll say true. Alright, and then we'll do our onload. And let's just do console.log. And we'll log this.response text. Okay, we just need to do our send. And let's save. Okay, we'll go to AJAX4. And if I open up the console here and I click get name, you'll see we get processing. So it's just getting whatever is in this PHP file. Now, what I want to do is I want to send a get variable to process PHP. Now, when you work with PHP, and don't worry about it if you don't know PHP, there's going to be some stuff in these files you're not going to really understand, but what I want you to understand is just the way that AJAX interacts with PHP, okay? Or just how AJAX works in general, with a couple different examples. So what we can do is we can check for a get variable. All right, we can do that by saying if, and then PHP has a function called isSet. And if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff with PHP, I have a course on YouTube called PHP Front to Back, where we go over all this stuff. All right, so we're going to say if isSet $_get, which represents the get superglobal, and we're going to search for a variable called name. If that exists, then we want to echo, and we'll just say get your name is, and then we're going to concatenate on $_get name. By the way, this is pretty unsafe, just outputting stuff like this, but I just want to show you how it works. There's actually security functions you should wrap around these and stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. So let's save that. Now the way that we can send a variable to process.php is by adding onto it a question mark, and we can say name equals, and let's say name equals Brad. Alright, so we'll go ahead and save that, and let's reload, and we'll say get name, and we get your name is Brad. So we sent this value to the PHP file, and it's getting it with this, and it's outputting it to us. Alright, now this right now is hard-coded, so what if we want to have a form that we can submit, and we can get whatever the name we put inside the input. So let's do that. So I'm going to create a couple forms up here. Let's go right below the button. I'll just put in an HR, and we'll say form. First of all, let's just do it through regular PHP. So for that, we would say method equals get. It is get by default, but I like to put the method anyways. And then the action, which would be the actual file, which would be process.php. Alright, and then in here we'll have an input, type of text, and then it would have a name, which would represent that get name variable, and we're going to set that to name. Alright, and then we'll just put in a input submit, and we'll say value equals submit. Alright, so if we were to submit this form, we'll just say John, and submit. It actually will make a normal request to process.php. It will redirect us. It'll also put that name variable inside the URL since it's a GET request. Alright, now with AJAX, what we want to do is we want to submit it behind the scenes and not actually have it redirect to the page. So what we'll do is copy this. What we'll do is put an H1 right here. Whoops. And let's say we'll just say get form. So this is a normal PHP get form. Alright, and then this one here is going to be an AJAX get form. So we don't need any of this crap because we're not actually submitting it to the PHP file. We're going to do it through JavaScript. So what we'll do is give it an ID of, let's say, get form. We also want to give the input an ID so that we can access it. So we'll give it an ID of name. Actually, let's do name 1. Alright, and then what we'll do is go down here, and let's do another event listener, but this time we're not going to do the button. We're going to listen on the form, which has the ID of get form. So let's say get form. And then we're not listening for a click, it's going to be a submit of the form. Okay, and then we're going to call the same function get name, which is this function here. Now when we submit a form, by default it's going to do what we just saw. It's going to try to go to a new file. So what we need to do is pass in an event parameter here, and then just stop that from happening with prevent default, like that. Alright, and then we can continue. Now we want to get the value of this input, because that's what we want to use for this name. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll say variable name equals document dot get element by ID. Okay, it has an ID of name 1, except we want to get the value of it. So we're going to say dot value. Alright, just like that. And then what we'll do is replace this hard-coded Brad with name. Okay, we're going to need to concatenate it like that. And then we'll get the response text. So let's go ahead and save, and let's reload. So this is the regular get form. If we submit it, it'll get reloaded and make a normal HTTP request. With the AJAX form, if I say John and submit, it'll do it behind the scenes. We get it back, and then we're just console logging it. Okay, and we can of course do whatever we want with it. We don't have to just log it. We can bring it into the web page and we can do whatever we want with it. All right, let me fix that title. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, guys. I know it's a little difficult to understand. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing but with a post request. Okay, when you use a post request, when you're doing something like adding data to a server, when you're submitting to a server and you're saving data, things like that, it's much more secure. So first we'll do the regular post form just like we did with the get. So we'll go down here and we'll say post form. We'll change the method to post. Okay, it's still going to go to process PHP. Let's save it. And then in process PHP, we can actually kind of do the same thing, and we can check for post variables. So let's copy this. So we'll check for post, and we can use the post superglobal just to differentiate it. Let's go ahead and write post right here so we know what we're getting back, and then post there. Okay, so if we go and we reload and we say hello, we submit, it gets redirected. You can see we get post, your name is hello. So it's redirecting us to the actual PHP page, and it's outputting that. So now let's do the same thing with AJAX. So what we'll do is we'll copy the AJAX get form, paste that in. This is going to now be the post form. Okay, and then we're going to change the ID to post form and change the ID of this to name2, just to differentiate these two. All right, so let's copy this event listener. Sorry if I'm moving kind of fast, guys. This video is getting really long. So this is going to be an event listener for the post form, and it's going to call a function called post name. All right, so what we'll do is go down here, and let's see. I guess we could just copy get form because it's kind of similar. And we'll change it to post form, or post name, sorry. So the form submits, right? We need to stop the the initial submit, and then we're going to grab the value of 2, name 2, which is this right here. Okay, and then instead of making a get, we're going to make a post request. Now with post request, we don't attach the parameter like this, so we're going to get rid of that, and we just need to add, needs a quote there. We need to add another property called set request header under open. So we're going to say xhr.set request header, and we need to set the content type, okay, since we're sending a post request. So we're going to say content dash type, and we want to set that as application. Did I spell that right? Application /x www.form.url encoded. Okay, that's the content type that we want to send this as. And then down here, when we send it, this is where we need to send our params. So what I'm going to do, and what I mean by params is the name. So we're going to create another variable called params up here, and we're going to set it to name equals, and then we're going to concatenate on the name variable, which is this, which comes from the form. And then all we have to do is pass that in to send. So let's save that and let's reload. Let's go to our AJAX post form. We'll say Tom and submit, and we get processing post, your name is Tom. All right, so it looked at this right here and it gave us this back, okay, as our response. And of course we could do whatever we want with that. All right, now I'm going to take this a step further. We're going to get a little more complicated. Don't worry about it if you don't know everything that's going on in PHP, but we're going to actually submit the data. When we make our post request, I want to submit it to the database, to a MySQL database. So, I mean, even if you want to stop the video here, if it's getting too difficult, that's fine, but I do want to just keep going just to show you guys. So in process.php, we're going to connect to a database. All right, and you have to have MySQL installed. If you have XAMPP installed, then you do have MySQL. In fact, you also have a tool called phpMyAdmin. So you could go to localhost/phpMyAdmin, and you can see your databases. So we're going to quickly create a database by clicking here. Database name, I'll just call it test, or actually let's call it AJAX test. All right. Now we're going to create a table called users with 2 columns. All right, now we're going to have an ID for the user, which will be an integer, and let's say 11 length, and it's going to be, let me make this bigger, it's going to be auto increment, meaning it's going to, the ID is going to increment by 1 every record that's passed in, and then we want it to be the primary key. And then we're just going to have a name, which will be a varchar, variable character, and we'll say 100 for its max. All right, and save. So we have a database called AJAX test with a users table with an ID and a name. Okay, remember that. So now what we want to do is connect to our database. We can do that by creating a variable called con, or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to set mysqli_connect. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, again, PHP front to back, we go through all of this stuff. So we'll say localhost is going to be the host we connect to. My password for my database is root, and I'm sorry, the username, and then my password is 1 through 6. And then the database we want to use is AJAX test, because that's what we just created. All right, so now what we want to do is go into where we check the post, right? And we want to create a variable here called name. And we want to take the post name and we want to wrap it in a function called MySQL real escape string. And this is really important for security. So we're going to say MySQLi. Did I say MySQL? I meant MySQLi underscore real underscore escape underscore string. All right. So let's go ahead and paste in here the connection and then the post name variable. Okay, so now this name is going to equal whatever is passed into the input form. All right, and then what we want to do is go down here and say query. We're going to set it to an SQL query, which will be insert into users. Okay, remember we have a table called users. And we just want to insert the name and then say values, and the value is going to be that name value that's passed in from our form. Okay, then what we need to do is check for the query. So we're going to say if mysqli underscore query, we need to pass in the connection, and we need to pass in the query that we just created, which is the insert query. So if that happens and it goes in, everything goes okay, then let's just say echo user added. Okay, else then something went wrong, and we can just echo error, and you can actually get the actual error string, which will just whoops, I want to go like that. We'll just concatenate with MySQL MySQLi underscore error, and then that just takes in the connection. All right, and that's it. So let's save it. Let's go back to our form and reload. Let's go to our post form, because that's what we're working with, and we'll say John Doe and submit. So it gets our post, your name is John, which is coming from this line here. I probably should have got rid of that. And then we get user added, because it went through all this, and it looks like it actually worked. So we can check it by going to our database, going to our AJAX test database, going to users, and now there's John Doe. Okay, so what we've done is we've made an AJAX request through this form to our PHP file, and then our PHP file actually inserted that into the database. Okay, and we got back a request, which is just this user added. I'm sorry, not a request, a response. So if we go and we add another name, let's say, I don't know, we'll just say Kevin, Hart, and submit. We get post, your name is Kevin Hart, a user added. We should probably get rid of that line. That's kind of confusing. We'll save that. All right, we'll add another one. We'll say Harry White, submit, processing, user added. Now let's check our database, reload, and we have those three names. All right, now one more thing I want to do is I'm going to create one more AJAX file called ajax5.html. And what we're going to do here is I want to fetch the users from here through AJAX. Okay, so what we're going to do is create another PHP file, and I'm going to call this users.php. And just to save some time, I'm going to paste this in. So we're connecting just like we did in the other file. This should actually be AJAX test. And then we're selecting all from the users table. We're getting the result, and then we're going to fetch the data, put it into a variable, and then we're going to echo it out, but we're going to wrap it in JSON encode. And what this does is it'll take our result, our associative array that's returned from the database, and put it into JSON format. Okay, and then give us a response. So let's save that, and then we'll go to our new AJAX5 file. And then this is actually going to be very similar to AJAX2, where we just got it from users.json. So what I'm going to do is copy that file, paste it in. Let's go ahead and change this to, let's say, AJAX5, and we'll say fetch from PHP MySQL. And we only need one button, so we'll say button ID 1, we'll say get users, and then we're just going to have the H1 with the users and then an ID of users. Okay, then we want an event listener for just that one button, and it's going to call load users. Okay, so we have two functions here, load user and load users. I'm going to get rid of the singular load user, and we just want this one here. Now instead of users.json, we want users.php. Okay, and then down here we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get the response. Remember, it's going to be encoded in JSON, so that's fine. We can leave this. And then for the output, we don't have an email in our database. It's just ID and name. So let's go ahead and just get rid of the email. All right, and then we just want to output it to the div with the ID of users. So that should be good. Let's save. Let's go to ajax5.html. And let's click get users. And there we go. We're getting the data from MySQL. It was all done asynchronously through AJAX. If we go to our network tab and we go to users PHP, you'll see the response right here. All right. And if we were to go back to ajax4.html and add a new user, we'll just say Brad, or Brad Traversy, submit, and then go back to ajax5.html, get users, and there he is. There I am. All right, now I know I said that I was going to go through some of the libraries like Axios and jQuery, but we're really running out of time here. I didn't expect it to take this long. So what I'll do is make another video of different AJAX libraries and how to use them. Okay, so at least you have the standard JavaScript XHR object under your belt. You should understand how that works, at least the very basics. If you didn't get the PHP parts, that's fine. Don't worry about it. That was kind of a bonus. As long as you understand how this object works, how we call new XML HTTP request, we call the open method, onload, and we can get our response, and we can do what we want with the response. Alright, so thanks for watching, guys. I apologize for the last 10 minutes or so. My son is being really loud upstairs. But thanks for watching. Please hit that like if you liked it, subscribe if you're not, and I will see you next time.